This is how Pope Leo XIV arrived at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, one of Rome's 4 major papal basilicas. The sky was overcast, and a gentle hush settled over the crowd as the Pope entered in procession. At his side walked the archpriest and members of the chapter, their steps steady, their expressions solemn. Inside, the faithful waited, some holding rosaries, others quietly filming the moment. For many, this was their first glimpse of the new Pope up close. He moved with calm reverence, heading directly to the icon of the Virgin Mary, known as the Salus Populi Romani, the protectress of the Roman people. There he paused and knelt. No words, just silent prayer. In that stillness, centuries of devotion seemed to come alive. Afterward, the Pope approached the main altar for a short liturgy. The choir sang softly, the ancient tone.
The bells of Rome began to stir the stillness of the early morning, echoing off the stone facades of buildings that had stood for centuries. It was not yet dawn, but already the ancient city was awakening with purpose. Pilgrims shuffled across cobbled streets. Clergy moved in silence beneath the colonnades of St. Peter's Square. The cool Roman air carried a quiet excitement. For today was a day unlike any other, the inauguration of a new pope. A new era was about to begin. Just days earlier, white smoke had billowed into the sky from the chimney above the Sistine Chapel, a signal that traveled the world in minutes. Habemus Papam. The conclave had spoken, and from within its solemn walls emerged a choice few had predicted, yet many would come to embrace. Cardinal Robert Francis Prévost of France, now taking the name Pope Leo XIV. He was a man known for silence, for reflection, for an almost radical humility, a theologian who had walked with the poor, taught in obscurity, and prayed far more than he spoke. Yet now he was called to lead over 1 billion souls. Today would be his first public act, not just as pope, but as shepherd. St. Peter's Square was a sea of anticipation. Long before the sun had risen, people had begun to gather. Young and old, rich and poor, pilgrims from every corner of the earth. Some waved flags. Others clutched rosaries. Many simply stood still, eyes fixed on the steps of the basilica. They had come not just to witness history, but to be part of it. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Pope Leo XIV was in prayer. Alone. No cameras, no ceremony. Just a man on his knees in a small chapel, seeking strength for the burden he had been given. He had once said that every great reform in the Church began on the floor, with a heart laid bare before God. And so he began his pontificate in that same posture. Outside, the square was alive with sound and color. Choirs rehearsed their ancient hymns. The Swiss Guard stood in formation, solemn and regal in their Renaissance uniforms. Cardinals moved through the crowds, robes flowing like rivers of red through a tide of humanity. The sun began to rise over the dome of St. Peter's, bathing the square in golden light. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the great bronze doors of the basilica opened. And before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story and want to see more deep dives into moments that shape history, take a second right now to subscribe, like, and share this video. Your support brings stories like this to life. From the heart of the Church, Pope Leo XIV emerged. He wore the simple white cassock of his office. No golden crown, no elaborate cloak. Just the weight of tradition and of expectation. The crowd fell into a hushed reverence. Some crossed themselves, others simply stared. Here he was, the man who would guide the Church into its next chapter. He walked with slow, deliberate steps, not as a king surveying his realm, but as a servant approaching his flock. His eyes met those of the crowd, not with authority, but with compassion. Alongside him, the cardinals moved in procession, followed by leaders of other faiths, Orthodox patriarchs, Protestant ministers, Jewish rabbis, Muslim imams. For this was not just a Catholic moment, but a global one. The altar stood at the top of the Sagrato, that elevated platform before the doors of the basilica. It was draped in white and gold linen, adorned with olive branches, symbols of peace, and lilies, symbols of resurrection. Before the altar, Pope Leo paused and made the sign of the cross. The liturgy began. Ancient Latin chants rose into the air, soaring above the square, weaving through the columns and echoing off stone. The first reading was proclaimed in French, his native tongue, taken from the prophet Isaiah. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor." The second reading followed in English, from the first letter of Peter. "Tend the flock of God among you, not under compulsion, but willingly." The Gospel was sung in Latin, the words of Christ to Peter. "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Then came the homily. Pope Leo stepped to the ambo. There was no paper in his hands, no notes, just a man speaking from the depths of conviction. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "the Church does not exist to dominate the world, but to serve it. We are not here to command, but to wash feet. The Gospel is not a relic. It is a revolution of love." He spoke of his journey, from a boy in Marseille watching the papal blessing on television, to a priest among the forgotten, to this moment of trembling obedience. He spoke of the future, of a church unafraid of change, but rooted in truth. "Let us walk together," he said, "not as judges, but as pilgrims. The doors of the church must remain open, open to the wounded, the doubting, the searching, because Christ himself walks among them." The crowd stood in silence, not out of confusion, but awe. His words were not fiery, but they burned, not loud, but they echoed. In that moment, something shifted. The office of the papacy felt less distant, more human, more divine. Then came the rite of investiture. The pallium, a woolen band representing the authority of a shepherd, was brought forward. It was placed on his shoulders, and he bowed his head. A simple gesture, centuries old, yet powerful beyond measure. Next, the ring of the fisherman, newly crafted, humble in design, was placed on his finger. The crowd erupted. The bells of St. Peter's rang with joy. Around the world, churches joined in, tolling in unison. A new pope had taken his place. 12 people came forward to offer obedience: a cardinal, a bishop, a priest, a deacon, a nun, a laywoman, a layman, a married couple, a religious brother, a child, and a person with disabilities. Each knelt, each pledged their support, and Pope Leo took their hands and blessed them all. This was the Church in miniature: diverse, devoted, alive. Mass continued. The Eucharistic prayer was spoken in Latin, the universal language of the Church. At communion, ministers spread through the vast square, offering the sacrament to the faithful. Tears flowed freely. Some knelt on the stones. Others simply gazed at the host, lost in a moment of eternity. Then came the final moment, the Urbi et Orbi blessing, to the city and to the world. Pope Leo stepped forward once more, arms outstretched, and offered the blessing that had echoed through time since the days of ancient Rome. But before stepping down, he looked directly into the camera, into the hearts of millions watching across the globe, and said, "To those watching in hospital beds, in prison cells, in refugee camps, in quiet despair, know this: you are not forgotten. The arms of the Church are open to you, and Christ walks beside you." With those words, a silence fell over the square, holy, reverent, immense. The ceremony ended, but Pope Leo did not return immediately to the palace. Instead, he stepped down into the square, into the people. No security detail could stop him now. He moved among the crowds, blessing children, embracing the elderly, listening to the voiceless. His first act was not to command, but to console. He stood for several minutes with a young man holding a Syrian flag. No words were heard, only the silent witness of compassion. He embraced a group of women holding photos of sons lost at sea. He laid his hands on the head of a child with Down syndrome, whispering a blessing. Finally, as the sun climbed high and the square shimmered with heat and holiness, Pope Leo XIV returned quietly to the apostolic palace. No grand farewell, no speech, just a wave, just a look. That evening, Rome was different. The air carried something more than warmth. It carried hope. In the days that followed, the world would analyze every moment of the ceremony. Commentators would praise the humility, criticize the lack of pomp, speculate on future reforms. But those who were there, those who felt the tremble in their bones, who heard the silence between the bells, they would tell a different story. They would say, "We saw a pope born in prayer,